Open your Bibles. We were over here the other day, 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2. Pray for us. We will be going over there tomorrow, grab that truck. Pray that it tows. We've got, probably get over there and find out that it doesn't want to go into neutral or whatever. So pray that we can get on the road, and then we're going to disappear into the sunset. 2 Timothy chapter 2. Now, let me explain something about this book and the guy that penned these words. We know this is the Apostle Paul, correct? Well, this is the Apostle Paul, but I'll tell you something else. This is not only the Apostle Paul writing this is the last thing he wrote. He wrote 14 books in the New Testament. This is the last book that he wrote. When you got saved, ever since you got saved, you have been spiritually prepared for death. Right? In other words, if you should drop over right now dead, we'll go through your pockets for loose change. Anyway, but no. I'm saying if you really, in other words, if you just dropped over dead, you don't have time to prepare for spiritually for death. But you took care of that the day you got saved. Correct? And because we are spiritually prepared, sometimes we think that means we're psychologically prepared. There's a vast difference between being spiritually prepared and psychologically prepared. You've been spiritually prepared since you got saved, but then you go into a doctor. A couple of years ago, I went into a doctor, and he told me that I had cancer right here on my face. And he said, don't worry, it's basal cell, and basal cell is, when you get old, someday when I am old, this will probably be a problem. You get basal cell, and he said, I'll take it out. And so he took this little football out, and I remember that was April of the year, and it's about 3 days later, we're headed for Michigan, and he called me up and he said, this is good friend. My doctor's a very good friend. And he said, brother, that's not basal cell. He said, that's squamous cell, and he said, that can kill you. And he said, you've got to come back. Because he did this football, he left a little at 3 and 9 o'clock. And he said, I have to do this surgery again. He said, you need to come back. I said, brother, I'm heading away from you right now. I said, I'm not going to get back. So it was 2 more months. And so then, he went in. He told me this, a good friend. He said, I can do this. He said, I usually do this at the hospital where I take it out and send it across to the lab and have it checked to make sure I get it all. But I've been trying to save you money. I said, hey. It's cancer. This is not where you save money. Save me. And so we went to the hospital. He did the surgery. But when somebody says that to you, when somebody tells you, I had a lady that did work for me many years ago. She went to the doctor. She was in fine health, and then she wasn't feeling good. She walked to the doctor. Doctor examined her, and he said, you got 2 months. He said, you have got 60 days to live. 60 days from that day, she was dead. She was spiritually prepared for death from the day she got saved, correct? But when somebody tells you have something that too many times ends up with death, now all of a sudden, now you've got to become psychologically prepared for it, okay? And here is the Apostle Paul. You know where he's been? He has been all over the known world at that time preaching the gospel. He has been saved for 32 years, preaching for most of those 32 years. He has traveled extensively. We know that he went all the way to Spain. From Jerusalem, he went all the way to Spain. There is even some reports that he made it up to England. I don't know if he did or not. But the Apostle Paul, I think he was the greatest Christian that ever lived. But now, he's writing to a guy he's my son in the ministry, right? This is just not just another Christian. This is somebody that he loves. And you know what he knows? He knows, I'm probably never going to see this kid again. I'm probably never going to write to him again. This will be the last communication I have. Guys, when you know that your time is about up or maybe up, and you have to speak to somebody, you know what you don't do? You don't go into flowing poetic statements for, 7 years ago our forefathers brought forth this continent, a new nation dedicated to the proposition all men. No. You know what you want to do? You want to take all of your emotion. You're saying this, I'm going to talk to this guy. I'm never going to see him again. I'm never going to speak to him again. I want to give him something that will stay with him. And what Paul did in this letter is he gave Timothy one word. One word. Just gave him a word. Now that's an amazing thing when you consider the fact that this apostle gave us many important words. This is the guy that taught us about faith, did he not? Man, he explained in Romans chapter 4 about the faith of Abraham and how we had that same faith when we believed on Jesus Christ. What you understand about faith, you understand probably from what Paul wrote. Isn't that true? But he also told us about grace. Man, are you not happy about grace? Brother, I am so glad for grace. You know what grace is? You know, mercy and grace. I've said it before. Mercy is not getting the bad you deserve. Grace is getting good that you don't deserve. If you're here tonight and you are saved, you don't deserve that. So you know what that means? You were saved by what? And this guy is the guy that told us about grace. This is the guy that told us about glorifying God. What know you not that your body is a temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which you have of God, and you're not your own? Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. He taught us about glory. He is the guy that in Ephesians said, you know what you need to do? You need to stand, you need to stand, you need to stand. Will you please stand, stand? I mean, he drove that word home, did he not? I mean, when you think of making a point on the word stand, you're going to end up in Ephesians. Isn't that true? This is the guy that told us about church polity. The way you run this church is an independent church, independent of every other church, because every church in the New Testament that this man started or had anything to do with was independent of every other church. And how we carry on our services. And he told us about those ordinances. This is the guy that told us so much. This is the guy that told us that we need to go out there and wrestle with the principalities and powers. He said, we are in a struggle, and you better grab a hold and try to throw the devil out of the ring. So think about all of the single individual words, glory and faith and wrestle and stand, and the single words that he gave us, and now he said this, I'll never see that kid again. I love that boy like my son. I'm never going to see him again. I'm never going to speak to him again. I am going to write this letter. You can look at the dates. He never wrote another letter after this one. I'm going to write, this is the last letter I'm going to write. You know what he knows? My time is up. He knows that any day he's going to hear death coming down the hall, and on death's clipboard, his name is at the top. We're all going to hear that someday if the Lord tarries. Is that not true? And guys, if you went to the doctor tomorrow and they said you got 60 days, you wouldn't get saved because you're already saved. You're already taken care of spiritually. But you know what you'd do? You'd start calling some folks. I had a preacher. I preached with him. I never had any kind of a problem with him. I didn't know he had a problem with me. And then one day out of the blue, I got this letter from him, and I mean, man, he scalded me. He went up one side of me and down the other, just railed on me. And it didn't matter, you know, and I've never said anything about him. That's just his prerogative. And then he got cancer. And I was driving across Montana several years ago, and my phone rang, and it was him. And he didn't sound like him. This guy was always robust, and he was just a man's man and a tough guy. And he said, brother, he said, this is, and he said his name. He said, I'm dying. He said, I'll be with the Lord pretty soon. And he said, I just want to call and ask you to forgive me for what I wrote in that letter, because I don't want to stand before God with that on my conscience. Now, guys, you want the truth? I forgave him about 2 seconds after I read the letter, but I'm not going to tell him that. I said, brother, you're forgiven. Don't think twice about it. He was dead in a week. Had he never gotten that, I don't think he'd ever made that phone call. But you see, guys, when you know, this is it. If you thought when you left here tonight you would never see the people in this room tonight, you would not just walk out to your car and say, let's get home to watch the evening news or the rest of our favorite program. If you thought this was it, you would spend some quality time with everybody here. And you know what you try to do? You try to give them something. And this guy did it in a word. And so I look at this because I think we are at the end times. I think that we are going to leave here. And I know that Paul wrote this to Timothy, but you know what we're going to do tonight? We're going to read Timothy's mail. We're going to read somebody else's mail, because do we not take what Paul wrote to other people as scripture? So what we're going to see, what he told Timothy, we know this is the last days. Look at chapter 3. He said, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. So we know that this is addressed to the last days. And there's no doubt in my mind that we are in the last days. And he said, I'm going to give you a word, Tim. And he said, you just got to grab this word, hang on to it with both hands, and take it right to the end. And he said, I won't be here. I won't be here when you finish your race. So you're going to have to take, this is all I can give you before I leave. I want to give you a word. And I'm going to give you the word tonight that the Apostle Paul gave to Timothy. It says this in verse 1, chapter 2, verse 1. Thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Let's bow our heads. Father, it is good to be saved. It's good to be in church. And God, I don't believe that this is the last service this church will ever have. Might be. God, we're going to leave here. It's the last service of this meeting, and I don't think it's the last time I'll preach here, but it might be. God, I know this. All of us one day will see one more sunrise than we see sunsets. One of these days, if you tarry, we will, as we have seen so many before us, we will pass from this earth. And I know that if any of us have any kind of a warning, a forewarning, if any of us know that we've got a limited amount of time, we are going to contact the people that we love the most, and we're going to try to give them something. We're going to abbreviate it. We're going to compress our love. We're going to try to make it as succinct and understandable and memorable so they can always remember this one word. And I think that's what Paul did with Timothy. And so I pray tonight that all of us will get the message that Paul tried to give to Timothy. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. He says here in verse 3, thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. You know, I told you I'm sometimes ashamed how many times I've read my Bible and then I read my Bible and I see something for the first time. It's just embarrassing. And a while ago I was reading my Bible and suddenly in that book right there I saw the word endure, 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 and I saw, man, Paul is trying to tell this kid something. You know, if you can't take a hint, you know what God does? He says it over and over and over again. I appreciate that because I can't take a hint. I really can't. I don't take a hint. But if you say something enough times, it finally gets through. You know, if you look at, don't go now, but go to Ruth chapter 4. That's where Boaz wants to buy the piece of property and he wants to marry Ruth. And he says, he gets the kinsman. He says, now Naomi has a piece of land and somebody's got to redeem it. And you're the guy that gets to redeem it. If you don't redeem it, then I'm going to redeem it. Do you want to redeem it or I'll redeem it? I mean, man, I mean, it's just redeemed how I love to proclaim it. I see it, brother. I see it. I get it. Over in Genesis chapter 12, he says to Abram, he said, and blessing I will bless thee, and cursing I will curse thee, and everybody blesses you, I'll bless. I mean, it's just bless, 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 bless. I got that one. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, you know the word translate only appears in 3 places. It appears 5 times in 3 places. It appears once in 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10. It appears a second time in Colossians chapter 1, verse 13. And it appears 3 times in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, where it talks about Enoch. And the Bible says, and God translated him that he would not see death. And this was his testimony that he pleased God before his translation. And so God translated. I mean, it's just translate, translate, translate. I got that. And so when I'm reading this and I see endure, 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 and I said, I got this. I can get this one. I can take the hint. God wants us to endure. Now look, I'm not talking about enduring to the end so you'll be saved. That is not what the Apostle Paul wrote. I told you we're not going to Matthew for our doctrine. But the first thing he tells us to do is endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Now I talked to you earlier about whether you're a soldier or not, and you have to establish that by yourself if you are or are not. But if you are, you know how a soldier endures hardness? He has to take a decision that doesn't always have him and his best interest in mind. You know, if there's anything about a soldier, it is that they literally will put their life on the line, maybe to hold back the enemy for 20 minutes, you know. They may set a soldier behind a .30 caliber and say, look, they're going to be coming right through here anytime. they're gonna overrun us. We're pulling back a quarter of a mile. We're setting up a secondary line of defense. You have got to hold them for 20 minutes. You know what they leave out? Because by 20 minutes you'll be dead. Yeah. You know what that soldier does? He may even look as he watches those guys go back to set up that secondary line of defense and think, I'll never see him again. He may reach into his wallet and pull out a picture of a wife and children that he knows he'll never hug again, he'll never hold again, he'll never see again. He's going to die half a world away from the people that he loves the most and that love him the most. And he might even be sitting behind that machine gun and saying, and my sergeant had me do this because he never did like me. I had a guy in my church. He was in Vietnam. He was a killer. He wasn't a hunter. He was a killer. I mean, this guy just killed. He'd clean his weapon and then he'd just go shoot somebody to sight it in. You say, preacher, that's wrong. I told you he was a killer. And you know, when they'd send guys out on patrol, they would rotate the point because that's the most dangerous position. The guy walking point is the guy that's probably going to get killed first. In his platoon, they never rotated point. His platoon leader always made him walk point. You say, why? He wanted him dead. He wanted to get rid of him. He said, you're walking point. Well, that's not fair. You know what he did? He walked point. He endured hardness as a good soldier. He took a decision that was not necessarily in his best interest. And we've got this concept, you know. Guys, I am sorry, but we've got this concept. I think all of us, you know how Superman under here, he has that blue shirt with the S on. In fact, oh, never mind. But we've all got one under here that says, it's all about me. We all think it's about us. I saw this guy, he was a 30-something idiot. And he wrote this article on the internet, why the 30-somethings are leaving the churches and what they have to do to keep us. What do you think anybody needs to keep you for, you fool? If you think this church needs you, hit the road. It'll be better off when you leave. Yeah, you might have something to offer, but if you think you got something to offer, you got nothing to offer. And what you got to do, nobody goes out there and endures hardness. Nobody will take a stand. Nobody will take a position. No one will carry on when it does not benefit them. I am sorry, people. That is the age that we live in. You know what he said? He said, Tim, he said, I'm going to be gone, buddy. He said, I'd cover for you, Tim. Come on. Wouldn't some of you older Christians, wouldn't you try to make it easier for some of the younger Christians if you could? You know you would. And Paul said, Tim, if I could cover for you, I would, but I won't be there, buddy. And you are going to get a word from God, and God is going to want you to do something, and it isn't going to be real good. I mean, you know, when you're in the service for the Lord, I can tell you factually, I don't agree with everything God ever called me to do or asked me to do or told me to do. I do not agree with everything He did. In fact, let me give you another prayer. I'll give you a prayer. It is okay if there's something going on in your life, it's okay to get down on your knees and say this to God. I disagree with what's going on in my life right now. So I can't say that. Well, you do, don't you? I think you ought to tell the truth. Just finish it this way. But I know you're right and I'm wrong. As long as you finish that way, you're okay. You can disagree. Come on, guys, you're not God. You don't see the overall picture. And you're not near as important as you think you are. So you are not going to agree with every single thing that happens in your life. So you know what you got to do? You just got to endure hardness as a good soldier of Christ. You know, I tell people to read 10 pages of their Bible every day. I read 30. I read a proverb. This gold marker is my proverb. I read 20 pages of the Old Testament. That's the red ribbon. 10 of the New. That's the blue ribbon. I read 30 pages a day. And I don't tell people to read 30 pages a day. I tell you to read 10. And then something that calls himself a man comes up to me. I've had this happen so many times. I just want to reach out there and tear his skirt. And he goes, I've had guys say this, you know, when I read 10 pages, I get a headache. What should I do? I said, read it with a headache. Oh man, you'd think I cussed him. Guys, I have had a headache since last year. I have had a headache since December. I read my Bible every day. You know why? Because I'm supposed to read my Bible. You know what your problem is? Your problem is that when you were this big, you told mommy your stomach hurt and you didn't want to go to school, and now you think God is as dumb as mommy. You know what you got to do? Toughen up. I'm sorry, there's no nice way to say it, but you're just going to have to endure hardness. This guy loves this young man. He loves him. But he said, I can't coddle you through this. I can't shield you. I can't carry you. I'm going to be dead, man. I am going to be dead. And the only thing that's going to get you down here or through this is for you to endure hardness as a good soldier. You're going to have to take an order that's not in your best interest. I hate to tell you this, guys, but it's not all about you. It's not all about your interest. God is not up there wringing his hand saying, now how can I make him happy? No, you know what he's saying? How can I make him holy? And how can I get him to do something for me? We are supposed to serve him. He is not up there to serve us. We are here to see to it that he has a pleasurable existence. He is not up there to see to it that we have a pleasurable existence. Guys, he told him, endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. I look at chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3. Look at verse 11. He said, persecutions, afflictions, which came unto me at Antioch, at Iconium, at Lystra, what persecutions I endured. But out of them all the Lord delivered me. Then you're going to have to endure persecution. Now let me tell you what persecution is. First off, it's what most of you will never experience. I can't get over how many people got this thing like, I'm going to be a martyr. If you're not doing anything for God, I say it this way, if you're not living for him, you're probably not going to die for him. I know people, they won't dress for him. They won't change their habits for him. They won't alter what they read and what they watch. And you're going to die for him? Who are you kidding? Let me tell you what persecution is. Persecution is what the world actively does to cause us grief. Persecution is with malice. Do you understand? I had a young man in my youth department, and he was the most outstanding young man. Oh, he wasn't a dynamic personality. No, he was not that at all. He wasn't like the smartest guy, but he was a good kid. But this kid was faithful, man. He was faithful, and he was in that book. Today, he pastors down in Central Florida, and he has just always served the Lord. And he went to public school, and he had shop class, and he loved his mom. There's nothing wrong with that. And the kid made a bookcase for his mother. And it took him several weeks to get it done, and he cut it, and he sanded it, and he put it all together, and he finished it. And the day before he took it home, some lost kid in that public school took a screwdriver and just destroyed it. You say, what is it? I'm sorry, that's persecution. Now, if that's all you get, you really got off right. You got off light, didn't you? But the fact is that there are some people, they hate our God, and that's really what it is. There's people that hate you only because of your God. If it weren't for God, they'd like you. You guys would get along. Now, that doesn't mean abandon God so you can get along, okay? I'm just saying that it is our God. He said, they hate me because they hate me, they hate you. He said, it's going to get so bad that they will think if they kill you, they're doing God a service. But guys, there are some persecutions. I am probably talking to someone here who got passed over at work for some kind of a promotion. Something you had coming, you just got passed over. Yeah, I did. Well, endure it. Get your thumb out of your mouth. Don't call whatever you have to call the 800 number from Washington, D.C. and have somebody from the Bureau of Employment, whatever, investigate your boss. Will you just take it? Can you just take it? Well, I don't like being shortchanged. I don't know anybody that does. I have never woke up one day. Look, there is no please persecute me spirit in me. All right? I'm not looking for it. Some of the brethren, it's like if God don't get them persecuted, they're going to do it themselves. That ain't me. If I can sneak through this in air-conditioned comfort, I am happy. If I can get out of here before they know that I'm here. Let me tell you what happened. I pastored in upstate New York. And there were 4 churches. We had Alberto Rivera in my church. 4 churches we had Alberto Rivera. He's the guy, he was the Jesuit priest from Spain. And one church had him. And he finished there Friday night. And then Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday morning he was with us. Then he went to the 3rd church Sunday night through and Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday he went to the 4th church. Well, the guy that had him initially in the first church, he was the kind of guy that he would make trouble for himself just so he could say he's suffering for Jesus when he was really suffering for stupidity. And so he had him, and nobody got word of it. The newspapers didn't hear about it. They didn't get wind of it. Nobody said, you know, and then we had him. And they didn't know he was in town. I even went to the Catholic churches and I said, listen, I talked to the priest. I said, we're having Alberto Rivera. They all knew who he was. I said, if you have anything to question, you feel free. I'll let you speak from the floor. We will not hamper you. You can say anything you want. I think it was their bowling night. They couldn't make it. And then we went to the third. Now, they got wind of him being in the area. The newspapers got wind of him on the third one. And on the fourth one, that fourth church really went through the fire. I mean, they had journalists in the congregation standing up and taking pictures and calling out and sneaking around outside. And the first guy was upset because that's what he wanted, you know. And I didn't. I just wanted Alberta in from my church. And he was a blessing to our church. And so we're after this, you know, we're all having breakfast. And the guy from the first church says, I think we ought to have Alberto Rivera back in our churches. Or in our churches. I said, we just did. Well, I think we ought to have him in to show them that they can't tell us who we can and can't have in. I said, we just did. I mean, didn't we? Sure. He said, well, I just get tired of standing alone. I said, you weren't standing alone. I said, the three of us had him. Four of us here had him in. And I said, we had him in. And I said, I had him in to help my church, and he helped my church. I didn't have him in so I could have a fight with the newspaper. I said, if you want to have him in and fight with the newspaper, have him in and call the newspaper and tell him the day's coming in, and you'll have yourself a time. He goes, well, I want to do that. What do you think I ought to do? I said, go mow your grass. But it was like, guys, I am not seeking persecution. All you got to do is live godly, and this world will not like you. Do you understand that? And it's going to happen. Now look, when I say persecution, you and I have not experienced persecution. I don't know how many fights I got into before I got saved. I have only been punched 2 times for the Lord. I have not been punched for my Savior near as many times as I was punched for the devil. And I'm not trying to get a 1-for-1, kind of like a even it out balance. I don't believe in balance myself. But what I'm saying is, I'm not looking for some kind of persecution. I just want to get through this. But guys, it's going to happen to everybody. But our idea of persecution and real persecution might be somewhat miles apart. I mean, we think persecution is, can you imagine this? You're in line for your crown, and right in front of you is one of those guys from like the 13th century that they roasted alive. You know what they did? They put one of those guys on a spit over a fire, roasted him alive, and after half an hour, he said to the Catholics that were killing him, I'm done on this side, you can turn me over. Oh, man. Say, that's what I want to be. You're nuts. You're nuts. Okay, there isn't anything about that. Well, God will probably give you grace. Oh, good. You can have it all. I don't want to be a weenie. There's nothing about it that excites me. Can you imagine, here's this 21st century Christian. He's in for his crown, and right in front of him is this guy. They roasted him alive. And the guy turns around and goes, they burnt me alive. They drowned my wife. They took my kids and raised them heathen, and they died without Christ. What'd they do to you? I was door knocking one day, and this guy opened the door, and I had my Bible, and he slammed the door in my face. It just traumatizes me just thinking about it. Guys, come on. I mean, you say you've been persecuted. What? Somebody tore the track up that you gave them? I was witnessing to a guy one time, and he got mad, and he said, why don't you go to hell? I said, I can't. I really can't. It just can't happen. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry at all. But I just can't do it. And guys, what I'm telling you is, There may be persecution. I'm not looking for it. I hear people say this all the time. Look, you can't get this by logic. Well, every generation of Christians has always been persecuted. Why should our generation be different? My parents' generation of Christians in this country were never persecuted. In fact, most generations of Christians in this country have never been openly persecuted. Isn't that true? So, I mean, don't make a doctrine out of some stupid statement you heard somebody say. But we may see persecution, okay? And if you do, you know what he said? Got to take it, Tim. Got to take it. Endure it. It's going to be persecution. And you know, I think the worst part of persecution, believe it or not, is not the viciousness and the punishment. It's the false accusation. Now look, get this straight. If they want you, they'll get you. If they want to bring a charge against you, they'll bring the charge. You remember when they pulled up the coin and they said, should we pay taxes or not? And he said, who is this here? That's Caesar. Well, give to Caesar what's his and give to God what's his. He made it very plain, go ahead and pay your taxes, and then went and paid his taxes in Matthew chapter 11, or chapter 17. He paid his taxes. And you know when they turned him over to Pilate, remember what they said? And he said we shouldn't pay taxes to custom to Caesar. He never said that at all. So don't worry, guys. You don't have to, well, if I just do everything right, they won't have a charge. Trust me, they'll make up one. They will make up one. He said he'll tear the temple down in 3 days. Never said that at all. So if they want you, they'll get you. They will. You're not going to live in the woods. I have my friend, we may have to live in the woods. Live in the woods. Put me in the woods one night. You know what I'll do the next morning? I'll come out of the woods going, take me to a nice jail cell with a soft concrete floor. Take me. Don't make me sleep in the woods again. Come on, guys. I don't want to face persecution. Biggest reason I don't want to face persecution, you know what it is? I'm afraid I don't have what those guys back there had. I am afraid that I will shame my Savior and my God. But he said you got to endure it. If it comes, you got to endure it. Look what he says in chapter 4. Look at verse 3. Listen, verse 1. Verse 1. I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead. Now, the quick and the dead. You really got to be from Texas to completely understand that phrase. Who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing in his kingdom. Preach the word, be instant, in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Guys, I'm going to tell you, in our churches, I didn't say somebody else's, in our King James Bible believing churches, we don't like being reproved, we don't like being rebuked. In our churches, you people want to hear something smooth and nice, like all sermons should be candy, and that's not where it's at. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. But after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. Guys, that is a prophecy by the Apostle Paul. Did you ever stop and think about this? There is a spirit in this world right now that was not in this world at the time Paul walked it. There's a spirit in this world that you and I no longer wish to endure sound doctrine. You say, oh, I want to. No, I didn't say your brain. I didn't say that your attitude. I didn't say that you're actively saying, I don't want to. I am telling you there is a spirit in this world that affects everybody. Do you know what vertigo is? Vertigo is where you fly into a cloud. And then you could be turning, or you could be doing a number of things, and you literally don't know which end is up. It's like you become a Democrat. And, well, guys, just because you know about vertigo, that doesn't inoculate you from it. I heard one of the most chilling, to this day, one of the most chilling recordings I have ever heard in my life. It was a pilot of a private plane. He had 3 other people with him in his plane. He's up above some clouds. He does not have an instrument flight rating. He has visual flight rules only, no instruments. Now, you have to take pilot's lessons to be visual flight rules, and then there's more instrument training before you're qualified to fly by instruments. And if you are not qualified to fly by instruments, no control tower, no air controller can vector you into a place where you need your instruments. He can't fly you into clouds. He can't fly you into anything like that. And this guy's above these clouds, and he said, I want to get down. And the tower comes back and says, are you IFR, instrument flight rated? He said, no, I'm VFR, visual flight rules. He said, then I cannot, it's a solid socked in, it is a carpet of clouds below it. And he said, I can't bring you down through the clouds. He said, I want to get down. He said, I cannot give you a heading. I cannot tell you that you can descend into those clouds. He said, and the tower said this, said, the only way I can do that is if you declare an emergency. Now, guys, when a plane declares an emergency, they become the only plane in the air. When they declare an emergency, an air traffic controller will steer jumbo jets to another airport. They want to get that guy on the ground. When you're a pilot, you say, I'm declaring an emergency. Now, you better have an emergency because you'll lose your pilot's license when you touch down if you don't. And he said, if you declare an emergency, then I can vector you through this. And he said, I'm declaring an emergency. He said, okay. So he put him on the heading for the airfield. The airfield's dead straight ahead of him. And he says, all right, now begin your descent. And the guy is talking just as normal as you and I. And yeah, I'm coming down. He said, okay, now I'm starting to get in the clouds. All right, now I'm in the clouds. And then there's about 15 seconds of total silence. And that guy comes back on as a totally different person. After about 15 seconds in those clouds, he comes back on. He goes, help me. Help me. I can't see. He said, and the traffic controller's watching him on the radar. And when he got into the clouds, suddenly this guy started going into a left corkscrew. He is auguring. He is literally flying this plane like this, but his inner ear thinks he's flying straight and level. And the air traffic controller says, you are in a left turn. He said, bring your wings level. Look at your gauges and bring your wings level. And the guy's gauges said he was in a turn, but he didn't believe him. He said, no. He said, I'm okay. And he said, no, you are. And this guy literally, he is on the radio and he's going, help, 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 just like that. He wouldn't listen. He flew that plane, augured it right into the ground. Now, knowing about vertigo did not inoculate him from it affecting him. You understand? All right, then, guys, let me tell you, there is a spirit in this world now. There are some spirits in this world that were not here when the Apostle Paul walked the earth. I was in evangelism for 5 years, right out of Bible college, from 1973 to 1978. And it was a different world then. There were not near as many King James churches at that time. But the biggest difference is this. If I asked, in those 5 years, if I asked 10 pastors, what's your problem? I would get, out of 10 pastors, I'd get about 8 different answers. One guy would say, it's a poor neighbor, it's a poor community, and the church is dwindling and we can't make it go. Another would say, well, the last guy messed up in some way, morals or something, and I have to live that down. Another would say, well, the community is trying to get the church out of there because they want the land. It would just, I might get 2 repeated, but basically I'd get 8 different answers from 10 different men. If I go to 10 pastors today and say, what's your problem? 8 of them will give me the same answer. They will say this, I have 2 problems. I can get them saved, but I can't get them into church, and I can't get my people to do what they know they should. Now, keep that in mind. I am on the other side of the planet. A couple of decades ago, I'm preaching in Australia. I am talking to an Australian pastor of an Australian Independent Baptist church, and I said, what are the problems that you have? I want to see what they have to face as opposed to what our guys have to face. I said, what kind of problems do you have in your church? He said, well, Australia's a different country than America. Yeah, he said, and Australians are different than Americans. Yep. And he said, so our problems are going to be different than the problems you have in your country. I said, yeah, I understand that. I said, so what are your problems? He said, well, basically, I only have 2 problems. I can get them saved. This is exactly what he said. I can get them saved, and I can't get them into church, and I can't get my people to do what they know they should. That's when I realized that spirit surrounds this planet. And everybody, it does not matter. It's not a culture. It's not a language. It's not a hemisphere. It is today. Guys, today there is a spirit that is going to affect all of us where we don't want to endure sound doctrine. That's what I'm telling you. If there's ever a time you're going to doubt what you were taught since a kid, this really is not the best time. If we wanted to make up a stupid doctrine, let's just say we wanted to say you're going halfway through the tribulation. You know that, I'll be honest with you. You know what I've always wanted to start a strange doctrine. I want to start the church of the latter growth. The Bible talks there one time about the latter growth, and I've always just thought I'm going to call it the church of the latter growth, where all of the men have mullet haircuts. It's the church of the latter growth. Now, you see, you guys are laughing, but I'll bet you if I did that today, somebody would follow me. If I tried it 50 years ago, they'd laugh me out of the room. But now that spirit is here. You know what that means, guys? If you won't endure sound doctrine, you'll endure unsound doctrine. Then you have to be suspect of you. You have to not trust. You know what your whole problem is? Your whole problem is the one person you do trust is you. But that spirit is going to fool you. It's going to deceive you. It's going to seduce you, and you're going to thank it for leading you down the wrong path. So, you know what he said? Tim, you have to endure sound doctrine. You're going to have to endure it. I said this in a church. I said, I wouldn't want a religion that thinks blowing up kids on a school bus is a virtuous act and that heaven is an orgy. Now you say what you want, that is exactly what Islam teaches. There's a lady sitting on the front row. She's visiting. She's saved. When I said that, she raised her hand and said, that's not so. Now let me explain something, guys. You can disagree with me anytime, any place, but when I'm preaching. Don't you ever interrupt any preacher, period. And when she did that, I ripped her face off. You say, well, you did it because of a woman? No, if it had been a man, I'd have ripped his face off. In fact, there's been a couple of men, I stepped out of the pulpit to go after them, okay? So she got off light. I ripped her face off. She didn't even get mad. But you know what she told the pastor afterwards? This is what floored me. She said, I knew what he said was true, but it just hurt the human family. Well, that's called, in the Bible it says, they'll say, prophesy smooth things. Don't tell us bad things that are true. We have come to the point where we would rather have, knowing it's a lie, we would rather have somebody tell us a nice lie than a harsh truth. That's the spirit of the age. You know what you got to do? You got to endure sound doctrine. I'm telling you, the only way to get to heaven is trust Jesus Christ, your personal Savior. I'm telling you, once you get saved, you got to get dunked in deep water. I don't care how that fits in your family. I don't care who that upsets. That is still good doctrine. And you've now, as never before, you don't only taught good doctrine and sign on and believe good doctrine, you've got to endure it. You've got to endure it. You've got to say, man, I'd like to walk away from this. That's that stinking lying spirit. And I can't trust that spirit. She said, Tim, endure sound doctrine. Take a look at verse 5. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions. What's the difference between persecution and affliction? Persecution is an active bad thing that the world does to you because they don't love you. They don't like you. Affliction, that's just life, pal. That's fallen arches. That's the front wheel on your truck breaking. Really, I mean, that's all it is. You understand? Again, I'm not going to say that every bad thing that happens to a Christian is the devil. It's not always the devil. Sometimes it's worse than that. It's called life. Yeah, you know anybody, and then one day they just had a problem, and you go, wow, why did they get that? How did they get that? How did they get glaucoma? How did they get this disease? And boy, there's some strange diseases now, are there not? And sometimes, now look, that affliction, it can be any number of things. It can be an illness. Some people just have lupus. My goodness, I can't tell how many people I know with lupus. And it is devastating them. I know some preachers' wives that have lupus. And it's killing them. It's killing them. That's sad. So what do? You got to endure the affliction. That's all you can do. Sometimes, with me, it's pain. Sometimes it's pain. It is just getting through the day. But that's how it is, guys. Don't even play the violin. Don't play your violin. Feel bad for yourself. You know what you got to do? You just got to endure it. Some days All I can do is I get up in the morning and I just say left foot, and I stick my left foot out, and then I say right foot, and I put my right foot in front of that one. I'm sorry, I know you'd like me to tell you that I just quote a verse and float from there, but that just is not how it is. And sometimes I got to do that for 20 or 30 minutes before those feet know what to do on their own. But you keep doing it. I hear this so many times. I don't feel very good, and when I feel good, I'm going to do something for God. You know what I figure? If I wait till I feel good, I'll never do anything. That's why some of you are never going to do anything, because you're waiting, because there's going to be this day when you feel good. No. You know what you're going to have to do? Just go out and endure the affliction and do what you're supposed to do. You just have to. Sometimes it is age. Oh, man. You know what it is about age? You find yourself having pain where you didn't even know you had parts. You make a move. Oh, what was that? We'll do that. We'll be in a motorhome, and one of us will go, oh, we'll look at you. Well, what was that? I don't even know what it is. What is in there that just all of a sudden decided to attack me with a knife? It's just age, guys. You know what my view of life is? My view of life. I got to tell you this. I had a pastor. I'm having this meeting, and he says, pray for my wife. I said, sure, why? He goes, she's turning 40 this week, and she's depressed. I said, I gave him the best advice I could. I said, tell her, don't worry about it. I said, this week she'll turn 40. I said, then just 5 years from now, she'll turn 50. And then 2 years after that, she'll turn 60. And he looks at me like, can't you count? And I'm thinking, pal, you don't know. I would sign an affidavit that there was only 5 years between my 40th and 50th birthday. And from my 50th to 60th, maybe 3. But no more than 3, 2. I mean, it's just so fast. My view of life is that life is a polished granite wall at a 45-degree angle, and my goal for the day is to hook a fingernail to slow my slide toward the abyss. Guys, they're just some things, you can't do anything about it. Well, it's not going to happen to me. Oh, man. I've talked to these guys that pump iron and jog all day long, and then one day they hurt their back, and man, they'll never pick up another weight. I'm not happy for it. I'm really not. What I'm telling you is, guys, it's going to happen. It is going to happen, and sometimes you just got to get out of bed when you don't feel like getting out of bed, which is like, for me, every morning. But you just got to go. Well, I'm just going to lay here until I feel like getting up. You'll never get out. Get up. You know what you got to do? You got to do what you're supposed to do, even though you don't feel like doing it. Well, I just don't have any energy. Well, you think you're going to have more tomorrow? I mean, that is a nice, depressing thought. I would kill myself, but I don't have the strength to hold the gun to my head. So I just got to face life. Guys, it's going to happen. These young guys, they're all going, not going to happen to me. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what I like to do? I like to talk to teenagers, and I'll ask these young guys, the jogs. I'll say, how many of you want to be happily married? How many of you want a nice job, where you provide for your family and a nice wife? How many of you guys are hoping to gain 50 pounds and have your belly stick out over your belt buckle? I don't get any volunteers. How many of you guys are hoping to be nice and bald? Nobody volunteers. You know what I finish with? Now, I'm going to ask the question here, all of you young people. How many of you want to end your life in a really nice nursing home? Don't you? Oh, so you want a not nice nursing home? I'll tell you what you do. Go to a nursing home and ask how many of those people ever thought they'd end up there. You don't vote this stuff in. You got nothing to do with this. You got nothing to do about it. It's going to happen. Man, the man that pastored the church that my son pastors, he started that church. He did a great job. He secured a building. Right next to the building, connected by a breezeway, is a house. They use the house for Sunday school rooms. I preached for him several times. I mean, no morals problem, no money problem, no doctrinal problem, but he had a heart problem, physical heart problem. They did surgery, broke a blood clot loose. It went to his brain, gave him a stroke. If he walked in here today, you wouldn't know it. He doesn't slur, he doesn't drag an arm or a leg, but he can't see over here anymore. They took his driver's license away, and when he gets behind the pulpit, he gets about 3 minutes into it, and then he wanders. Well, when did he plan on that one? It just happens, guys. You say, what am I going to do? You got to endure it. You're just going to have to endure it. It doesn't get any better. The parts wear out. You ought to be glad we're in a place where they can, let me say this. This is how I know evolution isn't true. Because if evolution was true, don't they teach that if you need something, it evolves on? If evolution was true, we would have all evolved Zerk fittings. For you ladies, that's grease fittings. We'd have got at least 8 of them. Here, 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 here. I'd have got a few in here, okay? I mean, could you imagine? Come on, didn't you ever do this? Have you not done this yet? You lady, you're getting the cereal out of the cupboard, and you go, oh, why that? It just happens. It's because you're dying. I just want to lift your spirits. Sometimes it's age. Hey, you know what it is? Sometimes it's discouragement. It's discouragement because life didn't end up the way you thought it would end up for you. Your kids didn't end up doing what you thought they would do. There's a lot in this life can discourage you. It really is. I mean, there are some people, they had big plans. Man, I remember this guy, he was like this cool guy in high school. And the last time I saw him, he was delivering uniforms to businesses. That was his big job. Well, I'm glad he had the big job, but I mean, you thought this guy would own the uniform business and have everybody working for him, but there's where he ended up. But he might have had the plans of owning the business someday. And guys, things happen. Things happen that discourage you. My wife's grandfather, her dad's dad, had a fur business back in the 50s, and they came home one night to find the entire place ablaze. They never recovered from that. He was 53 years old. He just pulled his truck alongside the road, had a heart attack, and died sitting there. It just took everything out of him. Guys, that's life. There's some things that will discourage you. I am not into this. I just need somebody to help me. No, nobody's going to help you. Nobody's going to hold your hand. You can't always have somebody hold your hand and say, no, come on, you can do this. You're going to find out one day you're going to face life. You're going to face a miserable situation. There's going to be absolutely nobody there. And you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to pick yourself up and get out there and do it. Nobody's there going to help you. It's just that's how it is. I was at this meeting, the church where I was. They had this staff, young guy, really a nice guy. And he was my liaison. That week, he'd pick me up at the motel, bring me to the meeting, take me back. If I needed anything, he'd go get it for me. Now, I don't believe this. This young man, he's married, got a few kids. This guy's a Bible college graduate. He is on the staff of a rather large church. And in talking, we started talking about reading the Bible. And the concept of reading the Bible was foreign to him. He'd never thought of such a thing. Read the Bible every day, all the way through it. He'd never thought of it. And so I told him, I said, look, read a proverb for the date and 10 pages of your Bible every day. And that was like, wow. That's like saying, you can eat cows. I mean, it was like a revelation to him. And then he said this, when you leave here, I'm going to give you my phone number. I'm married. And if I wasn't, I wouldn't be interested anyway. I said, why are you going to give me your phone number? He goes, when you leave here, I want you to call me every Saturday. I said, why? He said, I need some accountability, and I want you to call me every Saturday and ask me if I read my Bible 10 pages every day for that week. I said, let me tell you something, buddy. My wife and I had 3 boys, and I said, I changed every one of those boys once. That made him officially my kid. I didn't have to do twice. Once was enough. I said, I did not change my son's diapers. I am not changing yours. Well, I just wanted somebody to make me accountable. Why don't you make you accountable? Why can't you do something just because you should do it? Why can't you do it with a headache? Why can't you do it when you're sick to your stomach? You know what I appreciate? I'm going to tell you what I appreciate. I appreciate people that come through the doors of this church and you are sick, absolutely physically sick. And before you ever got in your car, you actually pondered, maybe I'm not going to go tonight because I don't feel very good. And then you say, you know what, but I ought to be there and I'm going to go. God bless you if you come. There's somebody, you might be here tonight and something has happened in your life and your heart is absolutely shattered. It is broken and you feel like you got no tomorrow. And you say, I don't even feel like going, but I'm going to go and I feel like a hypocrite for going. God bless you for being here. Do you understand? I mean, that is just how disappointment is. That is how discouragement is. You just got to go. You have got to endure affliction. It's going to happen. And nobody can nurse you through it and carry you through it. You're just going to have to do it yourself. But you'll be better for it. And he said, Tim, you got to endure affliction. Now, somebody's saying, no, I talk about enduring hardness as a good soldier, persecution, endure sound doctrine, and endure affliction. And somebody said, still haven't touched me. That's why I love the Bible. I do. I love this book. Look at chapter 2 and verse 10. Therefore, I endure all things. Yeah. Just in case you think I didn't cover you, that covered you. You say, well, what about this? What about, you didn't mention this. Well, what about if this happens? Well, what if this? You know what happened to me? You never talk about this. This is what happened to me. Endure all things. I knew a guy fell 13 stories down an elevator shaft. Lived. He was working on a new building. They'd taken a huge piece of cardboard and covered the elevator shaft. He stepped out over it and he fell. He had a tool belt. Because of that tool belt, he fell standing up. He fell vertically. He's going down an elevator shaft. His arms are out like this, and at the sub-basement, there was a 6-inch electric conduit that went across that elevator shaft, and his arms like this went right here, and it slung him 90 degrees and shot him out across that basement. Ripped his arms off. Just tore them off. He put his arms back on. I met him in 1987. Oh, man. You talk about pain. That guy, he's had fusions. His shoulders have been fused. His arms have been fused. He went to the doctor one time, and you know how they put the erector set metal and screws in you? And this guy said, I think you got too much metal in you. Little braces and stainless steel screws. He took out 7.5 pounds of metal out of that guy. I call him every night. I've been praying for him every day since 1987 to endure the pain that he has to endure. I pray for him every day. I called him a few months ago. He answered the phone. Hey, Sam. He's had a stroke. My goodness. You know that guy is serving God the best he can today. You can't guess it. You understand? You can't anticipate it. So you know what he said? Tim, endure all things. Somebody here is going to have a totally unique situation, a tragic situation, a grief-filled situation, a situation that people will not understand. You know what you got to do? Endure it. The last thing he said, Tim, you have got to endure this. You have got to. Look what he said in chapter 4. Let's look at verse 1 again. He said, I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Preach the word. Be instant in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. And watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry. I just want to stop for 1 second. Did the Apostle Paul write this to this young man, Timothy? Did the rapture happen in Timothy's time? So what did that mean? That means he became an old man, didn't he? I wonder if he ever read that letter 30 or 40 years later. I wonder if he ever read it when he couldn't see it very well, when his back wasn't very straight, when he was tired, so tired he felt like he couldn't be more tired and still live. But he says this, 6, "For I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also who love his appearing." Let me tell you about a man. There's a book out there called 5 Years to Freedom. It's one of the most moving books I've ever read. It's about the Vietnam War. Most all books about the Vietnam War, the most outstanding thing about the person they're about is a battle, some bravery in action, getting through a wound or whatever. Nothing like that, 5 Years to Freedom. It's about Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe. He was U.S. Army Special Forces, a Green Beret. It was 1963. It was October, I believe, of 1963. And at that time, just like you hear in Iraq, the Special Forces were in Vietnam as advisors. You'd have a platoon of about 30 South Vietnamese soldiers, and they would have about 3 Special Forces Green Berets, and they would advise them. They weren't even supposed to take part in any firefights. You know they did. And in October 1963, the platoon that Rowe and 2 other Green Berets were attached to was overrun by the South Vietnamese. They killed all the South Vietnamese. They captured these 3 Green Berets. And when Rowe was captured, he said, "I wasn't worried because this is the Viet Cong. This is down in South Vietnam. There were 2 communist groups in Vietnam. South of the DMZ, in South Vietnam, there were South Vietnamese who were communists. They were the guerrillas. They were the Viet Cong. Above the DMZ, those were the North Vietnamese regular army troops. And so this is down in the south, way down the Mekong Delta. And then he said, "I wasn't worried because the Viet Cong had captured 3 other Green Berets, and they kept them for 3 months and then just turned them free." So he thought, man, I'm going to have 6 months and I'll be out of here. 5 years. One of the Green Berets was just so acidy to them that they just killed him. They just got tired of it and killed him. So that let Rowe and this other guy in a camp. Now, when I say they're in a prison camp, there's no barbed wire, there's no fence, there's no guards. They're out in the swamps, brother. Rowe, he escaped 3 different times and couldn't get out. One time, he said, "I was so happy." He said, "I escaped." And he said, "I went through all this foliage, and here was a bunch of Viet Cong sitting around a campfire. And they looked at me and he went, could you guys help me? I'm a prisoner and I was out getting firewood and I got lost. Could you get me back to my prison camp?" "Sure, we'll help you." They never knew he escaped. They thought he just got lost. And here's what they told James Nicholas Rowe and this other American soldier with him, this other Green Beret. They said, "You can go home tomorrow. Wouldn't you like to go home tomorrow? If you're a prisoner in a foreign country, wouldn't you like to go home tomorrow?" So all you got to do is sign a letter that says, "I have committed war crimes against the people of South Vietnam. This is an illegal war." And they let him go home. They said, "We won't sign it." That prison camp never had more than 4 Americans at one time. And when it swelled to 4, he weighed 190 pounds when they captured him. 5 years later, he weighed 120. He said he had dysentery for 5 years. He had a black mold that was growing all over his body. He said if they wanted to discipline us, they just took our mosquito netting away at night. And he said, you'd have mosquito bites on mosquito bites. You never slept. You couldn't do it. And he said, what would happen is, over that time, one of those guys would lose the will to live. He'd just say, I don't want to live it. And they all saw it. And he said the only thing they could do would be the 3 of them would boost him. They would say, yes, you do. You want to live. You got your kids. You got your wife. They're waiting for you to come home. You want to get home. And that would restore the will to live. He said if they did not restore that will to live, the guy just shriveled up and died. Just turn his face to the corner and die. He said he went through this. He did not tell them what his MOS was. He didn't tell him what his job was. And they said, we know what you do. And they told him. He said, how did you find out? A radical communist college student in this country looked up his military records and sent word to the communists what he was. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. He said they used to make us listen to Hanoi Hannah. She was kind of like the Tokyo Rose. She would give the propaganda for the communists. He said they did that until 1967. And he said in 1967, they didn't make us listen to her anymore. They just had us listen to the news reports and the riots, the anti-war riots. And he said, you know what I realized? I thought my country would come and rescue me. Not only did they not come and rescue me, they'd abandon us. He said then one day, they came and they took the other 3 guys up to the main office. And he said they were up there for a couple of hours, and he said then they called me up there. And he said I walked in, and here's these guys he's living with, and he said hello, hello, hello. And the little Vietnamese head of the prison camp said, you can't talk to them. He said, what do you mean I can't talk to them? Well, the 4 of us are prisoners here. They're my fellow American prisoners. He said, no. You're the prisoner. They're going home tomorrow. They'd signed the letter. You know who picked him up the next day? Tom Hayden. You know who Tom Hayden was? That was Hanoi Jane Fonda's husband, a rank communist. And he thought, my guys, my own guys, let me down. But they'd kind of figured out where they were in the Mekong Delta, and they'd always said, if one of us gets out, we'll call in a rescue. So he thought, well, at least in the next couple of weeks, the Army will bring in a couple of helicopters, and they'll get me out of here. Never happened. Either those guys sold him out, or the Army didn't care. His country didn't care. His fellow soldiers didn't care. The Army didn't care. Now he is here in this Mekong Delta. He is the only American around these enemy troops. And he said, I was about to give up. And he said, you know what I had left? He said, I only had one thing left. You know what it was? My military code of conduct. You know what that is? That's a bunch of words on a piece of paper. When I read, he said, all I had left was my military code of conduct, I said, I got one of those. See, I am a prisoner here. I am, just like James Rowe, I am here under protest. I am here against my will. But I got a military code of conduct. Over the 5 years he was a prisoner, 3 times he was wounded by Americans. An American plane would be flying over. They'd see a Viet Cong camp. This guy's now 120 pounds. He's wearing black pajamas. He's tanned. He looks just like them. They'd strafe the camp on the way back to an airfield. And 3 times he was wounded by his own people. He said one morning in January of 1968, I was awakened by the sound of 500-pound bombs raining down on our camp. Now that the war was at its peak, and they were trying to eliminate all of those enclaves of Viet Cong in the Mekong Delta. And so they were coming in, and they were F-100s were dropping 500-pound bombs. Didn't know there's an American they were trying to kill too. He said, we ran from the Americans for 3 days as they hounded us and shot at us and bombed us and strafed us. And he said, we got into a field of elephant grass. Elephant grass would be about top of there, right there. And he said there were 2 Huey gunships working that field. Those 2 Huey gunships were flying over there, and every time they saw somebody, they'd turn and strafe them. And he thought, I've got to get separated and signal one of those helicopters come and get me. And he was on the end of the line with his guard. And what he did is he just kind of started walking a little bit slower, and the whole camp got ahead of him, so it was just him and his guard. And on one of the passes of those Hueys, that guard was watching that Huey helicopter. All he did, Rowe picked up a limb, and that guy's still laying there. He dropped him. Then he knocked down about 8 feet square, and as a Huey gunship passed over him, James Rowe stood there like this and waved him. And he said they flew over him, and he said they began to do a 360. They were coming back to get me. Man, he was so glad. But he couldn't hear the radio. If he'd heard the radio, here's what he'd have said. Here's what he heard. He'd have heard the co-pilot say to the pilot, there's one, what do we do? And the pilot said, next pass, we'll gun him. They were doing the 360 to come back and kill him. That pilot did a 360-degree turn. He lined his crosshairs up on James Rowe. He is waving him in, thinking they're coming to save my life. He put his thumb on the red button about to blow him into eternity. And above, the colonel who was supervising that entire operation said, don't shoot him. I want a prisoner to interrogate. So he took his hand off the button, pulled collective, he began to drop that Huey down, and as he did, one of those guys could see him better. He said, "That's an American." He said when they got down there, and he said they picked me up and they threw me on the floor, slid me on the metal floor of that Huey, and he said that pilot poured the kerosene into those two big jet engines. He said, "I felt it lifting me off the earth." And I thought, I got a day like that in my future too. Don't you? I'm going to feel it lift me off the earth someday. He said, they're taking me, and they said, "Who are you?" He said, "I am Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces." The pilot got on and said, I've just picked up Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces. He listened for a moment. He turned around to Rowe and he said, You're not Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces. Could you imagine? He said, "I'm Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces." He said, "No, you're not." He said, "I am Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces." He said, "No, you're not. You're Captain James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces." Or no, Major. He had been promoted from lieutenant to captain to major during that 5 years and didn't even know it, just for staying in the fight. And I thought, I think I understand that one. They landed at the base, and he gets off the helicopter, and he's wearing these black pajamas, and he's surrounded by all these guys in American uniforms. And they said, "We can't have this." So one of the guys went and got a brand new OD uniform, and they put it on him, and I thought, righteousness of the saints. There was a major standing there, and he reached up on his collar, and he took the clusters, and he pinned them on Rowe, and I thought, man, promoted just for staying in. He said, "And then we ate." He said, that day, all I'd had to eat was a half a cup of uncooked rice and a half a cup of rock salt. He said, they took me to the mess hall. He said, if it didn't move, I ate it. He said, he ate, and I thought, I think I got a day in my future like that one right there. It's called the marriage supper of the Lamb. He said, then they're trying to get him back to his health, and a guy walks in with a briefcase, and he said, "Who are you?" And he said, he opens up this briefcase, hands him a letter, and he said, "I am your legal representative for your court-martial review. Sign this letter. It's a waiver of your rights for your court-martial review." He said, "What?" He said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just a formality, but everybody's been a POW. It has to be reviewed by a panel of officers to see if they broke any of the rules of military code of conduct. Just sign it, waive your rights, you'll be okay." He said, "You don't understand." He said, "I was a prisoner for 5 years because I wouldn't sign a letter that said I did something I didn't do. I wouldn't sign it for them. I'm not signing it for you." He said, look, don't worry about it. You got to do it. You're going to have to do it. Don't worry about it. Trust me." He said, "Get out of here." Rowe said this. He said he thought about that, and here's his conclusion. His conclusion was, if they put me in Leavenworth, in prison, I will have 3 meals a day and an indoor toilet. He said, that's better than I had for the last 5 years. He called the guy in, signed the letter. They stood him up in front of a military panel, a court-martial, and they reviewed the last 5 years of his life. And then they looked at him and said, "No charges." And I thought, he was in the middle of the jungle. Who would have known if he violated that code of conduct? But if he had, it would have caught up with him right there. And I thought, judgment seat of Christ. You know what he was doing when I read the book? He was in charge of SERE. That is a part of all of our military now. It's called Survival, Evasion, Rescue, and Escape. I thought, he's ruling over his own part of the Army. Guys, you know what he did? He just endured hardness. And here's what he said. Keep this in mind. He said, the world doesn't care what storms you encountered, but did you bring in the ship? You know what's going to matter, guys? It's not going to matter how tough life was for you, how unfair things were, the hardship that you had that nobody else had or that nobody else understood. You know what's going to matter? Did you endure? Did you endure the hardness? Did you endure the persecution? Did you endure the sound doctrine? Did you endure the affliction? Did you endure all things? Last thing Paul said, Tim, I love you. I wish I could be there for you, but I will be gone. And if you remember anything I ever said, remember I said endure. I'd like you to stand with your heads bowed. Your heads bowed and your eyes closed. For some of you, this has been a long trip, hadn't it? I think all of us have been here a great deal longer than we ever expected. We have all endured some persecution. We've all endured some affliction. We've all seen this country get farther from God than we ever thought it'd go before we left. And I wish I could give you some magic formula that's going to get you through everything. The only thing I can tell you guys is what Paul told Timothy. Endure. Maybe before we leave here tonight, somebody just wants to come down, get on their knees, and say, Lord, I want to endure. You know what's the most important thing of a race? Finishing. I'm not a NASCAR fan, but I read about a guy one time. He's in one of those 500-mile races, and I think he led that race for like 480 miles. But he didn't estimate his fuel usage properly. And about 3 laps before the end, he ran out of fuel. Never finished. Guys, you have come a long way, but it is not over yet. And if I could give you one word that might get you to the finish line, it is the word that Paul gave Timothy. Endure. Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for letting us read Timothy's mail. Thank you for what the apostle told him. And I am sure, God, maybe when Timothy read this, he didn't see the need for saying endure, 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 but maybe 30 or 40 years later, that word stuck out on the page so much clearer. God, there are some people here that years and years ago, when they got saved and got into church, they never thought they'd be here in 2016. But here we are. They didn't know that they would experience some of the things they've experienced, but they have. There are young people here, God, that are just starting out in their life, and they have no idea what's around the next corner, but something's going to just devastate them. The one thing Paul would tell them, above all things, keep on going. Endure. Lord, I pray for these people. I pray for everybody here that they will endure all things. Maybe before we leave, somebody needs to get on their knees to you and say, oh, Lord, it's just about got me whipped, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to endure. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.